Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Gary's Record Collection. We're going to go back 50 years ago today and talk about an album that was very important to me back in the second grade. And it wasn't anything on the pop charts, but it sold well because there are a lot of copies out there. I am talking about Batman. This is a record that was put out in 1966 to capitalize on the Batman craze. There was an official soundtrack. However, several record companies decided, hey, this is a really great selling concept. We need to capitalize. So they made a lot of records. These artists that were up and coming, not known to anybody. These record companies were putting these out cheap. They were put in drugstores, believe it or not, and they sold for pennies to what regular records were selling. So this is Batman. This is on the Design Records label. Came out in 1966. This is the Batman theme. So this was great because this was the kind of thing it's like, this sounds like I'm driving the Batmobile and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go fight crime in Gotham City. And this is exactly what I wanted as a kid. There was another record that was put out it was called the Sensational Guitars of Dan and Dale. And it actually wound up being Sun Ra and his orchestra. But it didn't sound the same. There were a lot of horns in it, and it did not sound like what was on the show. Now, this one particular thing was not exactly like what was on the show. However, you got into the idea that, boy, you're cruising down the street in the Batmobile, this is your theme that you're going to. Another track on this was called Cheatin' Charlie, and it had that same kind of theme. Here's Cheating Charlie. And here we go. Driving right down on the Batmobile through Gotham City. This is great. And then it goes into this jazz kind of thing that is completely unexpected. And you're just grooving along. It's great. And then eventually it comes back to the original theme. That is awesome. And there's another track on there called Mighty Mayhem. This was the second track on the record. Pretty good. A lot of these songs on this record, after the first three, they all start with motorcycle sounds for some reason. Everybody thought they must have been at a dirt bike rally or something. This is Mighty Mayhem. piano. It almost has like a little bit of a Charlie Brown motif in it. It's great. So that was Mighty Mayhem. Now, I said I got this, I learned about this in 1972 when I was in second grade. And it took me a long time to find it. I had to actually track this down in a Salvation Army. But here it is. This is the actual album that I started with in 1970. I think I got this in 74 or 75. Now, interesting, I told you this was a drugstore record, so we've got this. But then I found on eBay several years ago, look at the difference here. This one says stereo. Now, that's true. Record companies put out mono and stereo versions of albums all the way through the late 60s, 67 or 68. I guess everybody thought that the stereo records would not play well on the mono record players at the time. That's my mom had. She just like drop it. It was the whole thing where you had like 15 albums, you put it on the spindle, and they'd drop one at a time and play them and all of that. That was great. And so there are stereo versions of these albums too, and that was great to get because the mono version that I had a little bit of a warp to it. It sounded like a warp, but it was like when they were mastering it, there was like tape warble, so you could hear the pitch go up and down and up and down. So I got the stereo version of it, dubbed it, sounded great. So that's what's on my iPad now. Now, believe it or not, I've got a few of these. I was able to find both a stereo and a mono version sealed. These are sealed copies of the records from 1966. Now, how are things still sealed after 55 years? Apparently they are. They sat in somebody's collection. And so I scooped them up. Are they going to be worth anything? I don't know. But now I have sealed copies of it. So it's like it's a collector's kind of thing, I guess. Another collector thing is getting overseas copies. And believe it or not, this was put out in many countries, including Colombia. And I just got this version. This is a Colombian issue now this is on Pickwick instead of Design. Pickwick owned Design Records. And as far as I can tell, all of the masters are held now by Universal. And unfortunately, they had that fire back in 2008, and we wonder if all the masters went up in smoke, which would be a real shame because this has never been issued on CD or digitally at all. So it may be that the vinyl versions are all we have left of this album. Now, I told you I got this back I learned about it in second grade. And so I was in second grade, and my teacher at the time, Ms. Amarayan, had records in her classroom. And I remember this one. I also remember Guitar Zan by Ray Stevens. And during break, everybody loved to play Guitar Zan. But she had the Batman record too. And so I loved it. And that's what set me out to go looking for it, trying to find a copy of it, which I did years later. Back in 1998, when the internet was really getting going and search engines were a good thing, I decided to start searching for my old teachers. And I found that my second grade teacher, Miss Amarayan, was back at my school that I taught at, or that I went to school and she taught at. And I sent her an email. I said, "Hi, my name is Gary. I was in your first class in 1971, 72. I remember this Batman record. I don't know if you do or not, but I loved it. And it got me started on record collecting and got me started on a whole bunch of things. And I wanted to say thank you." Sent the email out and didn't expect really to hear anything back. You never know if those email addresses were valid or not. I got a response. And it said, "Hi, Gary.
I cannot tell you how pleased I was to hear from you. Through the years, I have taught students of all ages. I have taught here at Riley. I recently returned to the school. SU's varsity basketball, football, and rugby teams, and at the alternative school in Oswego. I have taught hundreds of students, but a teacher never forgets her very first class. I remember you as if it were yesterday. I loved all of you that year. I still remember the moment when you all left the room at the end of the school year. I sat at my desk and sobbed. I had forgotten about your fascination with Batman. But as I was reading your email, the sounds of the record came back to me. You were truly crazy about Batman and everything connected to Batman. Thanks for writing to me, Gary. As a teacher, I always put my heart and soul into each student I ever taught. It's always so gratifying to hear that all that effort went into producing well-rounded, contributing members of society.
Fondly, Miss Amarian. So that's the story of the Batman album. It went a long way. It went from just the music from the show to from second grade all the way through reconnecting with the teacher, Ms. Amarian, who unfortunately passed away in 2010. But it was very important to me. And I remember every time I look at that album, I remember her class, I remember her, and I remember the influence she had. And that'll stick with me for the rest of my life. One album did that. It's like, how is that possible? But guess what? It is. Hope you like this edition of Gary's Record Collection. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.